Hello and welcome to the Game Line, where you find me, Matt Southcombe, rugby writer at Wales Online. Tonight, to look ahead to the Wales v Ireland match out in Dublin, I'm going to take you through the Wales start in 15, something a little bit different tonight. We're going to try out, and I'm going to discuss what we want to see from each individual player in that starting side. So something a little bit different, just to get you in the mood for the game. Just with an hour to go until kickoff. Get your comments coming in the comments section. It's going to be tough for me to keep up while I go through this side, but I'll come back at the end and go through a couple, and we can have a chat about what your concerns are, what your feelings are, what you're happy about, what you're confident about. Obviously, there's been a lot of predictions this week and not many back in Wales. So with that in mind, let's get straight in and start with Rhys Carré, loose head prop, obviously. For me, lucky to keep his place in the side this week. Wyn Jones came on against Scotland, won a penalty straight away. So thought that Wyn Jones probably did enough to warrant getting a start in this match. But it wasn't to be for him. From Carré, I think we just need to see that sort of consistency and solidity at the scrum. Wales need a platform, and that's across all areas of the game, not just the scrum. But first and foremost, I think he really needs to lock up his side of the scrum, because Ireland are going to be coming for Wales in the front five, and they will see Carré as a weakness in that scrum, and they'll be going after him. We all know what he can offer in the loose. He's a fantastic ball carrier, really a sort of modern day prop in that regard. Does a lot around the field, but if you're in the front row, your bread and butter has to be the scrum, and we just want to see Carré just doing his job there, getting that right first, and then he can shoot off into the wider channels if he wants to and get involved there. But first and foremost, really from Carré, we just need a bit of set piece solidity, just to give Wales that platform that they so desperately need. Moving on then to Ryan Elias, hooker. Again, another one for me, lucky to keep his place in the side. I think he needs to go up 2 or 3 levels after the Scotland game. Straight away my mind gets cast back to that first sort of 10 minutes at Parc y Scarlets, where he's given away a penalty. One of his line-outs was overthrown, and then I think he was free kicked at the line-out for dummy throwing, which was obviously a communication error with his jumpers. But that just kind of set the tone for the rest of the afternoon, and it was a slippery slope from there, really. And the rest of his performance that day was basically making up for those errors that he made early on. I like Ryan Elias. I'm a big fan of his. I don't want to be too down on him, but we just got to speak as we find it in instances like this. And I think he'll know as well that he needs a big performance tonight. Sam Parry not involved, which is a bit of a surprise. Elliot D coming in on the bench. Surprised Sam Parry wasn't given the nod really to start, and he's not even in the 23. So there we go. But yeah, Ryan Elias definitely needs to go up a couple of levels, just to really make amends for what was a difficult sort of first quarter in particular against Scotland. Thomas Francis then winning his 50th cap for Wales out in Dublin tonight. We know what we get from Thomas Francis in that scrum. First and foremost, that's his job as a tight head to sort of really be the cornerstone of that front row. He needs support from the other side of the scrum, as we touched on with Rhys Carré. But you don't pick Thomas Francis to do a lot around the field. He is getting better in that regard, but I think Samson Lee is a more dynamic ball carrier. So Francis has been picked for his scrummaging first and foremost. As I said, Ireland are going to be coming hard at the scrum. They're really going to want to test Wales in there. So I think first and foremost, Thomas Francis, sort the set piece out, give the backs a chance to get going, and from there, anything else that he adds is going to be a bonus. But for me, one of the few players to come out of the Scotland game with a bit of credit. Moving on then into the second row with Will Rowlands partnering Alun Wyn Jones. We just need to see a bit of gain line from Rowlands. Wales are struggling to get over that gain line. They're losing the battle there. And a lot of their problems are starting at the gain line. And that's that, basically. Rowlands' his main job, first and foremost, should be to get Wales over that gain line. He's an athletic character. He's a big bloke. He's a man mountain of a bloke. He should be winning his physical confrontations. If he's not, then I think it's probably more something to do with sort of a little bit more technical in his game, perhaps. Perhaps he's not hitting the right lines. Perhaps he's running at shoulders rather than arms. But he's a big bloke, and if Wales are going to have a chance out in Dublin tonight, he needs to have a good game. Jake Ball is on the bench. Carried an injury coming into the camp. If he hadn't carried that knock, I feel like he may have been involved earlier on in this campaign. So Will Rowlands knows, again, he needs a big performance alongside Alun Wyn Jones in that boiler house, and will be interesting to see how he goes. Just see a quick comment coming in saying Jacob Stockdale and Ian Henderson are out for Ireland. Henderson obviously would have been in the second row opposite Rowlands, a Lion, obviously in 2017. I think Quinn Rue has come in to replace him, but don't quote me on that. That news broke a little bit before I came on here. Obviously, weakens Ireland in that department, so Rowlands has got an opportunity to have a big game tonight, and I think he needs one. Moving on to the captain, then Alun Wyn Jones. I think it's a test of his leadership. The predicament the Wales find themselves in. I'm not going to sit here and question Alun Wyn Jones in too many facets of his game. 150th cap tonight, first player in history to reach that milestone is a remarkable achievement. But I think Wales find themselves in a real hole at the moment, and they need to look to their leaders to get into when things start to go awry. There's going to be times in the game tonight where Ireland get on the front foot. They're probably going to score a few tries as well. In those moments, that's when you look to your leaders to try and sort things out. Alun Wyn Jones obviously is the biggest leader in the side. He leads by example all the time. He's not always particularly necessarily the most vocal in sort of huddles and that. You've got Dan Biggar involved as well, who's obviously going to be taking up a lot of the communication, and Jonathan Davies, and there are leaders throughout this side. But I just think Alun Wyn Jones really needs to get hold of his squad. Hopefully he's done that this week from a Welsh point of view, and really deliver some home truths really in the build up to this one. And I think if nothing else, his performances have been good and they've been what we'd expect from Alun Wyn Jones. But if anything, we just need to see him, if things do start going wrong, get hold of people. If somebody drops a pass, if a line out doesn't quite come off, if a scrum gets a tune in, you need to see him in there encouraging, and really just bringing on those around him. I think that could be important tonight because Wales are certainly not going to dominate the entire piece. Moving into the back row then, Shane Lewis-Hughes keeps his spot. Obviously, this is the same 15 that was named to face Scotland. It wasn't the one that took the field. Obviously, Justin Tipuric dropped out of that game with tonsillitis. We'll come to him in a moment. But Shane Lewis-Hughes, I thought his debuts were pretty good, in all fairness to him. If he wasn't Wales's top tackler, he was certainly right up there in the stats. So it was a very good debut from him. For the sake of the balance in that back row, you need Lewis-Hughes to be the man doing the dirty work, the unseen work, the stuff that nobody else really wants to do. If he's not doing that, then things can the axis can sort of become a little imbalanced, and Justin Tipuric then becomes less effective. We've seen, that's why Josh Navidi has been worth his weight in gold in recent years, because he does that horrible stuff that nobody else really wants to get involved with. So you need to see Shane Lewis-Hughes. He's going to be big at the breakdown as well. Another area Wales have been really poor. The back row in general are going to be tasked with making sure that they tidy things up there because it hasn't been great. So you want to see him clearing out rucks, making sure that Gareth Davies has a platform from which to work. That's exactly the kind of stuff that Josh Navidi does when he's in the side. And if Navidi was fit and available for this one, I feel like he could have come into this back row. Now, whether that would have been Shane Lewis-Hughes or Talubay Faletau, as we'll come on to, that would remain to be seen. But just moving on, so I can just see the cursors come up there. That'll hopefully disappear in a minute. There you go. Justin Tipuric, open side, obviously comes back into the 15, having dropped out at late notice last time out, as we talked about just now. From Tipuric, I think we all know what he can do with ball in hand, particularly in wide channels. Very creative player, great hands, very intelligent rugby player. Often talked about as somebody who can play in the backs if need be. But again, I come back to the breakdown. His first job tonight has to be at the breakdown. Teams are going to target Wales there. Ireland are one of the best in the world at causing chaos in the tight. Wales got done by Scotland 2 weeks ago there, so they need reinforcements in that area. It's all well and good if Justin Tipuric is stood out in the 15-metre channels, but if Wales get turned over in midfield, then what's the point? So first and foremost tonight, I think Justin Tipuric needs to look after his job in the tight. If Wales are securing quick ball that they can use to effect in those wider channels, then I think maybe things might change throughout the game. But first and foremost, Tipuric's number one priority has to be that breakdown area. Moving on to Talubay Faletau then, under pressure for me, not being himself in the last 2 weeks. My colleague Ben James did a really good piece on why things are not quite working out for him at the moment. There's a bit of tactical, there's a bit of discussion to be had around the tactics and how he's being used. There was a great example that Ben found in the Scotland game of Josh Adams making a break and Faletau deciding to hang out in the wider channels rather than follow Adams's backside and get into the ruck. And Wales eventually lost the ball. It's interesting. He's obviously under orders to do that sort of thing. But he's doing well at the back of the scrum. I will say that about him. He's working his usual miracles there, and fair play to him for that. But by and large, his carrying has not been effective because he's lingering in those wider channels. He's not getting his hands on the ball as much as he really should be. You just want to see him a little bit more involved. You want to see him taking Wales across that gain line. Again, we come back to it because it's been such a big issue so far. So you want to see him looking after his jobs first and foremost in the tight, because I really think Wales are getting done there, which is why, similar to Tipuric, you want to see him a lot closer to rucks tonight. And then you can start thinking about getting involved with ball in hand when Wales have finally secured that platform. Moving on to the backs then. It's difficult to be too hypercritical of the backs, to be honest, particularly after the Scotland game, because quite frankly, they've got absolutely no platform to play off. It's very difficult to cause problems for defensive lines when they've got so much time to get set. The breakdown is so slow at the moment that defenses are not on their heels, they're on their toes. If you've got a big, a Will Rowlands character ploughing over the gain line and a few back rows going in there to get a quick ball for Gareth Davies, then defenses have got to backpedal, get back in line, number up, and that's when you can start picking isolated players off in attack. So it's difficult to be too critical of the back line at the moment, but we'll start with Gareth Davies. I think he needs to be on the money with his kicking. Often, the stick that's used to beat Gareth Davies, but tactically, Wales need to be spot on tonight. Ireland are a very, very tactically astute side, and Johnny Sexton will put his team in the right parts of the field. And he hasn't got Conor Murray inside him tonight. He's got Jameson Gibson-Park. But still, Sexton is a master tactician, and Gareth Davies and Dan Biggar need to match him there. So his kicking needs to be spot on, and I want to see him. Maybe he's being told not to do this, but obviously, we saw him in 2019 and Sean Edwards flying out of the line, intercepts, and if he wasn't getting intercepts, he was putting a lot of pressure on the ball receiver, if you will, in the attacking line. He was obviously given a free role to do that. That was his thing. So. He did it to great effect. So I wouldn't mind seeing him leading that sort of blitz again if we possibly could. But moving on, Dan Biggar, as we've touched on, he's fit to play after picking up a back injury against Scotland. He was never fit in that game. He was consistently struggling in the time that he was on the field. So it was no surprise to me when he came off relatively early in that one. From Biggar, again, there's been a lot of criticism of Dan Biggar in the last few weeks. Again, I think it's been a touch unfair at times. You've got a lot of people saying that Dan Biggar can't play the way that Wayne Pivac wants to play, etc. But as my colleague Mark Orders pointed out to better than I could probably, you could have had Dan Carter at fly half against Scotland and it wouldn't have made a blind bit of difference. Really think a lot of Wales' problems are starting up front. I think it's harsh on Biggar to say that he can't do these things. You see some wonderful hands from him in the past. You see him opening up defences in the Gallagher Premiership for Northampton Saints as well. So he has evolved his game to bring that sort of range of passing and that sort of outside arcing run and attacking nous into his game. So I think it's a bit harsh to just sort of pigeonhole him as a sort of high ball merchant. But that being said, I think particularly against France, there wasn't enough variation in the kicking game. A lot of loose kicking from Wales. You want to see a little. Ireland are going to bring a lot of line speed, so a little dinking over the top early on would give them something to think about. Little grubbers here and there, cross kicks if the wingers are back. It's not just about sticking high balls in the air and chasing after it. So you want to see a bit more variation in Wales's kicking game is probably the order of the day for Dan Biggar. Josh Adams, then, well, it's difficult to say too much about the likes of Adams and the other outside backs because they just haven't seen enough of the ball. Adams, to his credit, came off his wing a lot against Scotland, but he was running into a lot of traffic. We need to see Adams getting the ball in space. Take my mind back to the try he scored against Scotland in the 2019 Six Nations, where he danced around the outside defence. That's what happens if you give him the ball in space. He's absolutely lethal. You don't want to be sending him sort of running into centres or back rows or even tighter defence than that. So Wales need to find a way of getting him in the game. They need to manufacture him some space outside. But again, it starts up front. You have to suck in the defenders, get them closer to the breakdown by using your power game, and even a few pick and goes to get over the gain line. And that's when you can get Adams in space, and that's when we'll see the best out of him. Owen Watkin, I thought, was pretty good against Scotland. Stepped in a few times at first receiver, I recall. Looked pretty good. Range of passing as well, not something you often associate with him. He looked pretty sharp, in all fairness to him. It's a big opportunity because, cast your mind back to the start of the campaign and we were all talking about Jonathan Davies and Nick Tompkins and how excited we were to see that. Nick Tompkins not in the 23 this evening. So big opportunity for Owen Watkin then. I want to see him become a little bit more direct, go back to his roots a little bit. He's a big old bloke. He's not very old, but he's a big old bloke. And he can carry Wales over gain lines. But we just need to see him be a little bit more direct in his game, just to bring that. It's going to be tough for him tonight up against Robbie Henshaw and Chris Farrell. They're two very good defenders. But Wales have got to find a way of getting over that gain line. And I think Owen Watkin not necessarily holds the key to that, but he certainly needs to be part of that fight, along with his sort of second rows and his back rowers. He needs to be one of the more physical ball carriers this evening. Jonathan Davies, it's tough to say too much about his recent performances, to be honest. Again, largely been a bit of a bystander. The ball tending not to reach him too often, and when it hasn't been in a great deal of space. Going to be important tonight to sort of cut Ireland off and stop them getting into those wide channels. They've had a little reshuffle in their back three, but it's still a very, very potent attacking back three. So they're going to be looking to try and get out into those wide channels. I seem to remember Andrew Conway, who's come into the side, causing Wales quite a few problems in the past as well. So he's going to be important in that 13 channel. We talk about him being one of the best defenders in the world at that in what is a very difficult position. So I think we need to make sure from a Welsh point of view that he's sort of cutting off that wide channel and forcing the Sexton when he comes on that wraparound, forcing him back inside, back into traffic. And when he does get his hands on the ball, that's when we want to see that piston handoff come in. Get on that outside arc that we've seen from him so many times in the past and get Wales in behind. We haven't seen anything like that from Wales in the last 3 weeks. So just some sort of attacking threat from 13 would be very welcome. The wrong way with it. Liam Williams then, more of a bystander really than Josh Adams against Scotland. Struggled to get into the game at all. He had a couple of touches, but not a great deal. So you just want to see him get his hands on the ball. It's similar to Adams. Get his hands on the ball and get him in space. I would have it would have been harsh on Halfpenny, but I would have thought about putting him at fullback for this one, because then at least you're going to give him a chance to have a run, open his legs, stretch his legs, get them going. Look for holes, look for lazy runners here and there. But we just haven't seen him in the game enough for me. And, he's such an attacking threat. Your mind goes back straight away to that 2017 Lions tour where he started that fantastic try against the All Blacks. And, that's what he's capable of, but he's just not in the game enough. A lot of people in Wales would want to see him starting at fullback. There's a lot of competition in that back three sort of squadron, if you will, at the moment. So that would be one way of getting his hands on the ball a bit more, and we may see that happen if George North comes off the bench. But he just needs to be in the game. You can't have a player of Liam Williams' quality on the field simply watching things. So more ball in his hands would be very welcome from a Welsh point of view. Lee Halfpenny, as we touched on, it would have been you could have formed a fairly good argument to start in Liam Williams at fullback, but Halfpenny, he does what he does. In that number 15 shirt, he was pretty sound against Scotland, in all fairness. Defensively, covers that backfield better than anyone. It's probably why he's in there, actually, against the kicking game of Sexton. Covering, not giving him too much grass to aim for. Halfpenny is great at sort of reading where the fly half is going to try and put the ball and making sure that he can't find any grass. So that's probably why he's in there. So it's almost a given that Halfpenny is going to perform well without the ball. But what you need to see from him, I guess, he's tried to launch counter attacks a lot in the last few weeks, but hasn't really had much joy. He can beat the first defender or two, but doesn't really bust through the line in the way that would really sort of start causing opposition teams problems. So you just need to see him, try and get that sort of that form back. We saw in 2019 he really came on, and we really saw almost him back to his best. You think back to the 2013 sort of form that he showed in terms of counter attacking. We haven't seen that from him for a long time. So you need to see that a bit more. He needs to be a running threat. And, I guess, it touched on the kicking game from Bigger as well. With Halfpenny coming up from fullback, a bit more variation in the kicking game probably wouldn't go amiss. So, yeah, it's a given that Halfpenny needs to defend well, like he always does. But really, with ball in hand, to sort of justify his selection moving forward, we need to see him sort of busting open defensive lines, finding holes where nobody else sees them, and really launching those counter attacks, because that's what will put Wales on the front foot as well. If you can get in behind, it's easier to secure a quick ball, and it's easier to find gaps elsewhere on the field as well. So he's going to see a lot of ball come his way tonight. You'd like to see him do as much as we can with it. So that takes us through the team then. I'll just flash up the team on screen so you can digest it all. While I go through some of the comments that you guys have left. Thanks for coming in. We see a comment come in here from Matthew Sheeran asking what's the score then, gents. We did a prediction, as we always do on Wales Online, where all the writers have to try and predict how they think this is going to go. And unfortunately, from a Welsh point of view, myself and my colleagues Ben James, Mark Orders, and Simon Thomas all went for an Ireland victory. I'm trying to think back to what my score was. I think my score was 27-13 to Ireland. Fancy Wales to nail a couple of penalties and perhaps grab a try, but it's difficult. You don't want to sort of be negative all the time, but it's hard to be positive. In all honesty, at the moment, Wales are not giving us much to sort of feed off. In terms of trying to find those positives. So it really is difficult to sort of back them, really, I guess, in times like these, because there's not a lot to shout about, in all honesty. Another comment coming here. I think we should forget about the here and now and plan for the World Cup. As a Welsh fan, I believe we need to build a young squad ready to take on the world at the World Cup. That's from Rhys James. Well, Rhys, it's an interesting balancing act, and you wouldn't be alone in thinking that necessarily. There's a lot of people out there who are saying exactly the same as you are. I think it's difficult. Wayne Pivac finds himself now with 5 defeats in a row. The pressure's coming on. It's coming from all angles now. He's his defence coach is gone. They really need wins. So I'm not really sure they have the luxury of experimentation right now. A win against Ireland would go a really long way to sort of giving them perhaps that buffer that they need to start experimenting. I think you will see some new faces in the Georgia game, but right now for Wales, it really is all about trying to get those wins and going from there. So we'll leave it there, folks. Not long till kick-off now, about half hour to go until kick-off. Obviously, we're going to have you covered across all the channels on Wales Online tonight. We'll have the live blog going throughout the match, and I'll be speaking to Wayne Pivac along with my colleagues in the press pack after the game to get his thoughts on it. And myself, Mark Orders, Ben James and Simon Thomas will all be giving our sort of views on how things went for Wales out in Dublin. So for all the latest from Wales v Ireland, you stay right here on Wales Online.